Hello teachers, welcome to part 2 of the How Do I Identify Barriers to Learning video. In part 1, we discussed the importance of identifying these barriers and how there are actually two general categories to it. One is a skill problem and number 2, it was the performance problem, right? We spoke about what they are. In today's video, we're going to be going over the difference between the both, and we're going to discuss it more in detail and go over some examples for you to be able to differentiate whether it's a skill problem or a performance problem with your students in the classroom. So let's start with the skill problem. If you remember correctly, in part 1, we spoke about how a skill problem is basically it happens when a student has not, learned the skill before, has not been exposed to the skill, has no history of learning the skill. So then it's definitely a skill problem. But let me explain this further, right? How do we know exactly it's definitely a skill problem? So number 1, I have never seen the student perform the skill. You have definitely not seen the child perform the skill before. But just a quick disclaimer before I move on. You may have taught the skill in a group. In a school environment, it's very rare that you have one-on-one with a student. Usually students learn in a group. You teach in a group. So you may have taught this particular skill in a group setting, but due to your student's unique learning needs, he may not have received the instructions. So it could still be a skill problem. You have taught the skill, but he did not receive it. He did not understand, what you were teaching. He probably was not attending and therefore has actually not learned the skill. So definitely a skill problem. So for example, a student learning multiplication, right, the timetable, you have definitely not taught the skill. It's probably only going to happen mid-year. But then a different teacher comes in the class and asks your student, can you tell me what 2 times 2 is? He does not respond, and then for sure it's a skill problem because he has not learned how to multiply, he has not learned the timetable, he has not memorized the timetable, so definitely a skill problem, yeah? So number 2, I have seen the skill performed before, but in a different context. So you may have the parents coming to you and saying that, my child can do this, my child can multiply, he has done it at home. Or you may have a different teacher, a different subject teacher telling you, as a class teacher that he can perform the skill. He can do it in my music class, maybe, or he can do it in the arts and craft class. But when you try it with him, he can't perform it. So that just means that your student may be having issues generalizing the skills. Sometimes when they have the barrier of generalizing the skill, they may not be able to perform the exact same skill across different locations, across different contexts, or even just across different people. He may be able to exhibit the skill, display the skill with one teacher, but will not be able to do so with a different teacher. So we will just have to guide them and teach them how to perform the skill across different people, and teach them that when you are expected to perform this skill at a different class, you have to behave the exact same way as you did in the previous class or when you did it in a previous context. So number 3, I have seen the skill before, but with prompt or guidance from a teacher. So when you're thinking, I've definitely seen him perform this skill, where have I seen him perform this skill, how have I seen him perform this skill, and you dig deeper. When you dig deeper, you're like, yes, I remember he performed the skill, but there was guidance from a teacher, there was guidance from maybe a peer, or say there was a sample in front of him. So he was doing the skill, but with a sample. The minute the sample was removed away from him, the minute the cue was removed, the minute you remove all prompts, all guidance, he does not know how to do it. So we would still categorize it as a skill problem. He has the skill, but it has been performed before with a lot of guidance and a lot of prompt. You remove that, he can't perform the skill. So definitely still a skill problem. So those 3 examples, those 3 explanations would constitute a skill problem. So now what's the difference, with the performance problem? Let's move on to a performance problem. So with the performance problem, you remember, we spoke about how he knows the skill, he's performed the skill before, but would not perform it now, or would not perform it when you ask him, say tomorrow, right? So how do you know it's definitely a performance problem? How can you suspect, for sure it's a performance problem? Number one, I have seen the skill perform before. I've seen the student perform the skill consistently before, but when I ask him now, he's not responding. So for example, you have a student who is really happy, really joyful, comes in the class every single day, responds to your greetings. You say hello and he's like, hello teacher, how are you? He asks you how are you, you say fine, you ask him how he is, he says fine. Very good, it happens every single day. And then suddenly, for 2-3 days, he walks in the door and you say hello and he does not respond. He has no eye contact, no response, nothing, just removes his shoes and goes in the class. So now for sure it has been happening so consistently for the past few weeks, the past few months. He's been responding to your greetings, with a smile, with eye contact, and suddenly he's not doing it. So it definitely is a performance problem, and you would want to now figure out why it's happening. Number two, the student can perform the skill, but he won't do it when he's being asked. So there's some sort of history of him learning the skill. Maybe if you look at education plans, or you look at his progress reports from the year before, he's definitely learned the skills. He's consistently been displaying the skill, been performing the skill, but he's just not doing it now when he's being asked to. So with this, I'd like to mention this one thing: lack of motivation to learn. So lack of motivation to learn may interfere with motivation to respond when a student knows the correct response. It means he knows it, but there is no motivation for him to respond because he lacks motivation to learn. For example, if you are playing farm animals with your child, your student in class, right? You've got a bunch of sheep, some cats, some dogs in that farm activity, and he's counting the farm animals. He's having a lot of fun. The student's having a lot of fun. He likes it. He's spontaneously counting the animals. So for a fact that he definitely knows how to count the animals, right? And then when you move on to a structured environment, now he's gone to the table and say there's a worksheet, and on the same worksheet there are farm animals, and you ask him to count the animals and he refuses to do so. But he definitely did it in the farm, with the farm activity just earlier. He could count the animals, but now in a more structured environment with the worksheets, he's not going to count. He's not counting when you ask him to do it. So that is definitely a performance problem, and you will be able to suspect, it's not a skill problem, but a performance problem. So number three, the student will perform the skill accurately when he feels like it. So I'm sure at some point, as teachers, we tend to sometimes say this, yeah, he can do it, but he'll only do it when he feels like it. Sometimes when you're telling the parents, going over the student's progress with the parents, you tell the parents, yeah, he can do it, but only when he feels like it. Then, if you have that moment, if you have told yourself that at any point of time, then it's definitely a performance problem, because he knows the skill. He's performed the skill, but only performs the skill when he feels like it. So then for sure that's definitely a performance problem. Yeah. So now that we've gone over in detail the difference between the skill problem and a performance problem, and we've gone over some examples to show you exactly what it is, and how you can definitely tell whether it's a skill problem or performance problem. I hope you'll be able to identify these barriers in your classroom. So remember to always ask yourself 2 questions. Is it a skill problem or is it a performance problem? Does your student know the skill or does the student not know the skill? Yeah? So thank you and good luck to all you teachers out there, and I hope to see you soon.